It's the picking of a story that I really wanted to speak to with you all. Because so often adults just, they'll go get any old book off of a shelf and they'll just read it to their child. And it doesn't have any substance to it. It's fluffy, or it's brass, or it's crass, or it's rude. And it doesn't have any food in it for you, for the child. When I go looking for a story, the first hook that has to happen is me. It has to feel true and authentic. And those stories don't come easily. You have to go looking for them. But once I find that story, then I take that story and I work with it personally. It becomes a teaching tool for me. It becomes a gesture of an aspect of personal growth in me. It might even quicken me spiritually. I work with the deeper esoterics of the story. If there are no esoterics, it's not a story for me, and it's not a story in my work. Steiner said, he didn't tell you what to teach, he gave indications. When you work with 5, 6, 7, 8, it's the archetype. When you're working with 7-year-olds, go to the fairy tales. But he doesn't tell you what fairy tales to tell. It's brilliant. How many of us really like teaching or doing things other people tell us to do? No, we have to penetrate the material and find what really sings in your heart and soul. And then if you bring that forward, you've got magic. That's the recipe for magic. If you're alive with it, if the spirit of it really soars inside of you. These stories that I bring forward, first of all, are teaching stories for me. Fairy tales are not just for children. They're actually for adults. The children live with the pictures. Their souls are fed with the pictures. Their souls hold those images. And when they are adults, those are the reserves that they call on to be able to face the challenges that are awaiting them in their lives. I brought a couple of books here, The Wisdom of Fairy Tales and The Interpretation of Fairy Tales that come out of the Waldorf stream. Children, in many ways, are very resilient. And of course, seeing an actual really violent something is very different than hearing a violent something. There's always a backlash with Waldorf people when they tell these fairy tales that have witches that are going to put you in the oven and eat you. And the parents think, oh, we shouldn't have our children hearing that. But it's very different hearing a story, a high teaching story, hearing it, because then the children use their imaginations in a way that works for them. It doesn't get any scarier than they can imagine in their imaginations. And it actually is food for their souls, because what they're also getting is, in the end, the witch gets it. She doesn't win. And goodness always triumphs over evil. And children need to have that. So there are so many stories that are myths, legends, and fairy tales where the shadow has to be named. We cannot evolve. Our growth is stunted until we can name what it is that is a shadow within each of us. But when you have children that are really being mean or bossy and aggressive, it doesn't work to sit down and have an intelligent conversation with these children. It's not where they're at. They're in the world of the imagination. So guess what you do? Stories. It's stories. I'll give you a short example. I had a girl just not that long ago, and she would walk into a room for imaginative play. All right, you're going to be the mother, and you're going to be the father, and you're going to be the baby sister, and I'm going to be the princess. But I want to be, no, has to be this way. And then, no, you can't play, and you can. She wasn't physical, which is not, it's okay. And so we did a lot of observations in the room, in the group. and got pretty clear about what to say, how to meet it initially. Oh, we don't play like that here. We let people decide who they want to be. And you can decide who you want to be, but you can't be telling other people. That's not the way it works here. It's just the way it is. This is Sage's place. You got to do it Sage's way. But to really address the issue, we did a lot of observations of this child. And then I brought the parents in. And with the parents, as I do with my staff, I asked them to really look at how they were activated by their child. What triggered them? Were they reacting to something their child was doing, or were they responding appropriately? And children are perfect for your personal growth, because they can just right there that fast. And if you're awake, you realize there's an opportunity. There's something in you that you haven't addressed. And because of that, this child is activating you, and you cannot respond appropriately to that child. So I asked them to think about those things. We talked about the observations we had made of that child. We sat in silence and meditated, called on her highest, and asked what was needed from all of us to address her behavior. We wrote a pedagogical story. There were all of these darling creatures. Coincidentally, the children had all made little creatures recently that were all harmoniously playing until the buffalo came in. And the buffalo just wanted to dominate everything. Jumped into the water, splashed it, almost drowned half the animals, and was just taking over, and everybody was unhappy. And they worked the story to resolution. And then, after that, the children played that story many, many times in their imaginative play. And guess who wanted to be the buffalo? Bossy Pants. And she loved being the buffalo, and she especially loved the ending when she finally understood how to be a friend, and then the animals were climbing all over her, and they were all having all this great body contact, and it was wonderful. That child changed. She is not the same person. And I did bring a storybook, Healing Stories for Challenging Behavior. This lady's a nice lady, so you can check that out if you want, if you're interested.
We did the story of Siddhartha. I believe, yes, part of the story of Siddhartha, eventually he sits under the tree, and the demons come and try to shake him out of his meditation. And those little demons, man, those kids loved the demons. They could not stop being the demons. And there was a point out there.
They won't see it, it's too small.
Yeah, in the imaginative play world, like after, in between times when they were just out playing, the entire sand pit ended up organized into like the Siddhartha camp and the demon camp. And there was like tension. And so, again, you know, one of these things that's been interesting in apprenticing to your work is how to take that, how the story is bringing things to life, and then the kids are actually stepping into the roles. Then you have this opportunity of working with the shadow through the story and using the characters because it's already there, you know, the conflicts and everything like that. And part of it is bringing a story in to meet a problem, and part of it is letting the story kind of make the problem or make whatever is truly going on, whatever truth is going on, really come to life. And then there's an active way to do it. And it kind of, it can be one or the other. First the conflict and then the story, or then the story and the teaching about conflict.
And once they've lived, created from the story and all, once they've done that, then the beauty of it is the next year when you're together, and I do hang on to kids for a long time, something might come up and we'd go, that is just like Mara, wasn't it? And they just get, there's like this download that happens. You know, and there's never been any rah, 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 rah. Adolescence, you start working with historical biographies. That's the way Waldorf teaches history. It's brilliant. You know, if your task is to pick those historical figures that you believe can bring a high teaching and inspiration to the children. You know?
Like Ray Charles.
Like Ray Charles.
And can I just, would
yeah.
you though, in that era, is it still told?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It's oral. It's all oral.
I just wanted, the reason I asked is I actually, when I was in a teaching situation with you a couple years ago with older girls that were coming into the adolescent cycle, World War II came up. And I mean, I had to sit with this, oh my God, they didn't know anything. They didn't know anything about World War II, and I had to sit with how much do I tell them if they've never heard the story of Hitler and the atom bomb? And after working with a little bit, I did go into it some with them, and telling the story of the atom bomb felt so different than showing them images of an atom bomb. And it, again, like you were saying, it allowed the imagination first, as big as they could imagine it, but still within their realm. And then they could start to work with it at a slower pace. So I wanted to hear about that. There's something about telling a story instead of showing a story.
And it's, Steiner was brilliant in terms of really giving you a picture of the evolution of consciousness of a child. And each year he would recommend story material that would meet them right where they were. Everything was great for me in the first years. So we got the archetype, that's the fairy tales, and then stories about holy people and fables, and the Old Testament and the Norse myths, and then all the ancient civilizations. Then we got to the 6th grade and I had to teach Rome. And I'm like, Rome? Are you kidding me? And I was appalled. I didn't want to do it. And at the same time, standing in that class with these kids now that I had been with for 6 years, I could literally sense shadows descending. Literally. I felt like I could see it at times. They ate up Rome. They ate it up, and they wanted more. They loved it. So, that's an easy thing to get in terms of pedagogy for you guys to look it up, stages of consciousness development. You can do it online. It brings to mind what you just said came to mind, so it must be then to tell you this. In the 7th grade, I had to do explorers. Oh boy. So then we've got all of these white explorers going over to these other worlds and chopping off hands and legs and taking over lands and stripping them of wealth and all of that. Oh, my children were horrified. How could anybody do that? I said, really? And I said, well, because they didn't see these individuals as equals. They were underdogs. You should know that. And they went, what? And there were 2 children in the class who were underdogs. And no matter how we addressed it, it was just always there. If it wasn't overt, it was there. It was living in the room. And I outed him. I said, we have 2 underdogs in this room. That's how it happens. Wow, that was the greatest high teaching. I love that moment. All of the parts of the story are you, including the landscape. Sometimes the landscape is wretched, and it's like we have wretched times in our lives where we feel wretched, and the landscape is wretched, and the king is dead, and the queen is in prison or something. When the stories start out like that, you know it's going to be an intense story, and it's reflecting the intensity that we experience in our lives. Look at the stories as if every single part is part of you. There's no point in dealing with Mother, Father out there anymore. We need to deal with Mother, Father inside, right? Fairy tales, myths, legends, some folk tales can be roadmaps for us in our lives. You can think of legends. Can you think of any legends that you know of that you find inspiring? Any myths that you know? Parsifal, for sure. Yeah, the fool goes into the forest, right? How many here feel like they can identify with that? And we can see all of the pitfalls that fool encounters, and the gift at the end of a fine, great transformation. Yeah, those are the teaching stories. And if they're high teaching stories, you can come back to them over and over again and get something new out of it each and every time, because you're different. Every time you come to a story, you are bringing a package with you that needs something perhaps from that story, and so you'll get something different out of it. And today, when we hopefully have time to hear Rumpelstiltskin, I'm going to ask you that. Where are you in the story? Where are you in that story?